Hello and welcome back to the Digital Adoption Podcast. As always, I'm the host, Sean Boyce, and I'd like to introduce my guest today, Stacy Williams, who is a learning and development expert with over 20 years of experience in the space. Hello, Stacy. How are you? And thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Sean. I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And from what I understand, you're calling in from sunny California.
Yes.
I'm so
The Bay
jealous.
Area is always beautiful.
Awesome. Well, next time I'm out there, I'll have to stop by.
Swing by anytime.
So we want to talk a lot about your experience in learning and development, in particular how it concerns software. Before we jump into that, can you share anything with our audience as far as little known fun facts about yourself?
Sure. Can I share too?
Yes, of course.
All right. Learning and development fun fact. I'm very proud of my team of 4 at Collaborative Solutions. We just won one of the top 50 spots in the Learning Elite category of the Chief Learning Officer magazine annual Best of the Best L&D teams. So we're super excited to be one of the top 50 in the country by Chief Learning Officer. I'm going to find out specifically where in the top 50 my team ranks in April when I go down there in Florida to receive our award. But that's one fun fact about me and my team. We're doing great things for our industry, and we're super proud and humbled by that award. Another cool fact about me that's a little more personal, I've been doing martial arts for about 15 years now, and I've studied 5 different styles. So it's a part of my life. I live and breathe it. It makes me happy. It's my source of happiness sometimes. So yeah,
I have to say, as far as fun facts go, those are 2 of the coolest fun facts that have been shared on my show so far. So first and foremost, congratulations are certainly in order. That is exciting. We're absolutely very excited to hear you talk more about your experience, of course, because clearly it's well-deserved and you have a lot to share. But 2, I spent a fair bit of time training in martial arts as well also, and I can't say enough good things, both for like physical and mental health. So that's awesome. But don't mess with Stacy. She's a total. Okay. Awesome. So let's kind of dive into the main content for our show here today. Now, with all of your experience, Stacy, in learning and development and helping people get better at using software, that is really kind of the core of what we like to talk about. So can you share with us kind of right off the top, what you would recommend in terms of what is the best way to train people on how to use software? We'd love to learn more about kind of your philosophy, your approach, and anything you would recommend.
Yeah, I think with a lot of things, the most important thing to know is to know your audience. So if you're a learning and development professional, it's really important to not necessarily come to the table with ideas around how to best train your audience, but rather to get to know your audience on a more personal level and understand how they want to learn. You will have learners or groups of people who want to do everything on their phone. So digital adoption would be perfect, right? But you also have those learners who prefer to ask questions in live time, and they want to do a webinar, or they want to attend an in-class training. But it's always best to keep your options open and diversify the types of trainings that are available to your audience based on how they want to learn. So that's one thing that I hear a lot of learning professionals out there saying, like, this is the way to go, or LMS, it does everything you need it, on demand, when they need it, all that stuff, and that is absolutely true. But the fact of the matter is not everybody wants to learn that way, so it's really important for learning and development professionals to keep their options open and really get to know their audience and how they prefer to learn. That is my best advice.
So the next question I have for you, Stacy, of course, is you'd mentioned different options that people will ultimately be looking for in order to kind of get the most out of learning how to use software, but there's a balance to kind of strike there. What would you recommend with regard to that as an approach?
Yeah. So I was reading an article by Wilbur Castro, who is a director of learning, and he had mentioned 3 things that I thought were key. Number 1, remember, training should always be just in time. It should be just for me, and it should be just enough. So give them exactly what they need when they need it, right? So this is where digital adoption comes in. We want to make sure that when they're in that space about to use that digital asset, whether it's creating a spreadsheet or navigating through a process. We want to give them that information as they need it, and we want to walk them through that step just enough so that they can complete the process and do what they need to do without bombarding them with a bunch of articles, right? Or a 1-hour training. So really, we want to just give them what they need, when they need it, and how they need it.
That's excellent. And it is easy to remember too. It's a nice catchphrase. It rings well.
That's why it's so important to mention here.
Definitely.
It's very catchy.
So let me make sure I got it correct. It's just for me, just in time, and just enough.
Correct.
It's awesome. And I think that makes a lot of sense and echoes what I think we're seeing in kind of digital adoption from the perspective of people don't want to be overwhelmed. They want just what they need and only when they need it, kind of thing. So that approach makes perfect sense. It would be very effective. But of course, there are experts out like yourself out there who are helping us actually do that and connect those dots, right? Because it's easy to do that wrong. So can you talk a little bit about how, in your experience, how you would achieve such balance like that in making sure that it's, customer curtailed, just for me, just in time, as in you're hitting them at the right time, and just enough, as in like not overwhelming them with too much in the way of choice or commitment to time.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that answer that I had given you earlier, and that was just giving them options, right? Because we will have groups that want to learn everything on their phone, and they just want to know what they need to know when they want to know it, right? But we also have those groups that are still wanting that personalized interaction. Those people who want to be walked through multiple processes and just kind of use their lunchtime or use their time on the bus or whatever to really just kind of learn all the different tools that are within this software platform. But even those people who like to do the traditional training routes sometimes don't want to do that full training route, right? Sometimes they want to know what they need to know. So really, digital adoption, in my opinion, is one of the best options or best tools for giving people, again, just what they need to know when they need to know it. So how do we strike that balance? I strike that balance by, again, knowing my audience and making sure that I give them options. I want to give them a community where they can interact with each other and find answers, or crowdsource knowledge and then push it into videos on an LMS. So I want to give my learners multiple choices for getting the information they want to get. But I absolutely want to create an independent learner as much as possible, right? Because we find that companies can absolutely reduce costs when you give them the ability to find answers themselves. That way they're not calling into the call center. They're not leveraging the customer support team as much. And all of these are incremental cost savings for the company. So give them multiple options. Every learner is different. It's kind of like that, one size doesn't fit all. Same thing with learning. People want options, give them those options. That way you hit as many people and you meet those needs as much as possible.
Excellent. Definitely picking up what you're putting down. Can you give us a little bit of an idea on the type of software systems that you help train people to use?
Yeah. So I've worked for about 3 or 4 different software companies over the course of the last 20 years. And I have taught people how to use gamification tools. I have taught, and this is like for teachers or, for business professionals. I have taught them, I've actually done communication platforms here in Silicon Valley with a company that was purchased by a larger company called Intuit. So we did a lot of that stuff. And right now I'm currently in the Workday ecosystem, and we are teaching our existing employees how to build and configure Workday systems for our enterprise businesses. So we're doing a lot of stuff there, but we're also training internal employees on how to use the tools we use every day, right? We don't use Excel anymore. We use something that's kind of like Excel on speed called Smart Sheets. So how do you use that? It's got so many more features than, say, something like Excel. We have them use different tools like our own Workday system. So how do we teach them how to do that? So I've done a lot of different types of software platforms in the last 15 years. And really, I've noticed that every audience is different. right? Every audience wants to know something different. Something is important, and it's usually based on role, Sean. So I'm gonna just think back to the communication platform that I used to train about, right? So it was kind of like business to business transactions. So we would cater to the receptionist, right? The receptionist is the one who would use our system for making appointments and for canceling appointments. But then we would have the business owner who would need to look at the analytics. So it was the same company, right? But we were tailoring our trainings and the different assets that we were hitting and really focusing on based on what was important to those two different demographics, because the receptionist doesn't really care about analytics, right? They care about doing their job well. So it's just a matter of knowing what's important to those very specific people who are going to be using your software and giving them, again, exactly what they need when they need it and just enough of what they need.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. Makes a lot of sense. And so another question I have too is that this is not the first conversation we've had with regard to these topics, right? I could talk to you about this stuff all day. Something that you've mentioned before is the different types of training that are available, and that training is not a lecture. I think you even have some statistics that you might be able to share with myself and the audience regarding levels of like retention from lectures and why you may not recommend that as a kind of a channel to be able to reach an audience and be able to train them effectively. So I'd be curious to know your take on that. And then also love to hear from your perspective with all your experience is in how do you make content more engaging?
More engaging. I love it. Okay, so those two questions are actually very related, or at least I have a related answer. So how much is actually retained when we do lecture-based training? And the answer is no more than like 10%. People get distracted, especially in the digital world, right? We're multitasking. I'm surprised, Sean, you're not multitasking right now.
I was gonna say, I can't even like watch a show anymore without playing with my phone. Like,
well, like, I mean, some people have their emails, right? Or our phones. So here's mine right here, but down, don't worry. But here's the deal. People don't pay attention, or their attention spans are a lot shorter when all they're doing is engaging in auditory learning. And when learning and development teams do webinars, where all they're doing is talking for a good 30 minutes or 1 hour, guess what, you guys, you're probably talking to about 2% of your attendance audience, right? Your attended audience. So you want to make sure that you scale back on that knowledge and make it a more learner-centered approach. And this is one of the things that I think kind of gave us the edge with this Learning Elite award that we won, is we really pushed the whole learner-centered classroom, whether it's a virtual classroom or an in-person classroom or even an LMS, right? Any sort of learning environment, you have to put the learner at the center. And what that looks like is it's some sort of kinesthetic, tactile, any sort of practice-based training where they are doing some sort of application or practical knowledge feel around what this content is and what it means to them and how they're going to use it. So let me give you an example. We have a graduate program, right, for the company that I'm currently working at, and we bring in all these new graduates, brand new to the corporate world. They're very excited, and we're teaching them all this technical knowledge. And you know what? It's honestly really dry and boring. And I sit in the back of the room all the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really dry knowledge. But my team is sharp enough to know that we have to take this really, really dry knowledge and we have to make it engaging. Per your second question, right? We have to make it engaging. So how do we make it engaging? We put them in front of the software and we say, you teach us, right? Here is what you need to know. Research that, group work that, okay? Talk about it, synthesize it, process it, be able to explain it to each other, and then come back to us and tell us what you learned. Teach back, right? And that's obviously an ideal situation because that's in class, right? But how do you do that virtually? You can absolutely do that virtually. We use GoToWebinar, we use GoToTraining, and that allows us to do small breakouts, right? So for business communications, I teach that on a semi-regular basis nowadays. I don't do as much training as I used to. I'm more on the strategic side, but what we used to do is we used to say, okay, we're not going to teach business communications without giving them an opportunity to communicate, right? That doesn't make sense. But believe it or not, a lot of the learning and development teams do that, right? They'll teach you about business communications, but you're just going to sit there and listen. So making it a learner-centered experience is giving them the gist of what they need to know, those tips and tricks, those strategies to really make them a better presenter. And then break them out into smaller groups, or if you have a small group already, have them create some sort of a communication message and deliver that using their webcams, kind of like we're doing now, to the audience so that they're actually practicing those tips and tricks you just shared with them. And sorry, one more thing. A lot of L&D teams will do one and done trainings, right? Like, let's say that I just taught a business communications class. I'm done. Bye, Sean. Good luck. Never see you again, right? Well, the best training programs will revisit that topic a week later, a month later, and have the learners kind of do it again, right? Do it again and do it again. Reiteration, reinforcement, that creates those neural pathways in our brain that strengthens that skill and makes it a behavior. And really, learning and development is all about behavior change. Bottom line, we have to see positive behavior change, reinforcement, and engagement, along with practical application opportunities in training is what's key. That's my secret sauce.
A lot of great value there to kind of unpack, especially that last part. Well, two that I will specifically call attention to is that putting people in front of the software. I love interactive for me has always worked much better. Even when I give presentations, like I stay away from like the boring slide deck stuff. I want to hear from people. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to know what they care about, because unless I know what they care about, I don't know if when I'm standing up there, what I'm talking about is of any interest to them at all. So using it and experiencing it has always been a kind of a better approach for me. And then a component that you mentioned there as well too, as far as like the retention methods, right? I think about different, so the software engineering background, I've learned multiple programming languages, but it wasn't like it's a mastery as a concept, and it's a lifelong kind of lesson learned type thing. It's not a one and done that you mentioned. So I want to specifically call attention to that too as well. Also, in that there needs to be multiple touch points. Like you go over these things and you have them accessible for the people that need to know how to, need to essentially know everything there is to know about them, but over time. And then you build on that knowledge and you kind of gain momentum that way. Excellent. So a couple of the questions I have for you are more specifically when it comes to digital adoption is what tools would you recommend? What experience do you have with any digital adoption tools out there? What do you use? What do you find to be effective? Right? What would you recommend for other people to take a closer look at given your experience?
Yeah. So I remember working with digital adoption tools when digital adoption was first, was in its infancy.
Yep.
And what we used to do is we used to just have those help bubbles and create content around those help bubbles. And those help bubbles would sometimes link to our community, right? Because we want to just give them what they need to know. And maybe if they want to dive deeper, they can click the link and go to our community article. So it was a very basic approach, but now the DAP, the digital adoption programs out there do so much more. And really, I think that's the way to go, right? We want to give them, again, the steps that they need to know when they know it, but we also want to look into the analytics associated with that. So one of the things that L&D teams out there should do that use these digital adoption programs is to look at those analytics, see where those gaps are, right? What are people using? Where are people abandoning processes? What content is being consumed the most, right? Kind of look at those analytics, look at those numbers, those metrics, and base those skill gaps on what you should be focusing your attention on for future trainings, right? Or for new processes through this digital adoption platform. So really using those analytics is something that learning and development teams should leverage when identifying what is most important for them to focus on as far as content is concerned.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying. Another great question that I love to ask professionals such as yourself, because I'm a problem solver and I'm always looking for problems to solve. This one would be in the digital adoption space, but what would you say is the biggest challenge professionals like yourself are faced with today in learning and development for which you wish there was an easier solution?
You mean a aside from budget.
That could be one of them. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like sometimes too many options, right? So giving them enough options, knowing your audience and giving them enough options based on what you know of your audience is exactly what learning and development teams should do. Strike that balance, like you said. But sometimes because tech is so far and deep now that these options can become convoluted. And I think as a learning and development professional, it's really just knowing what's important and what's not important, what's going to help and what's kind of going to help and what's not going to help at all, right? Because there's so many tools out there. Sean, you should see my inbox. I get so many advertisements around, hey, we could do this for you and we could do that for you. And have you tried this? And did you know this metric? Like we get bombarded with all these different options that make our processes smarter. But the fact of the matter is, we as learning and development professionals have to keep focused on what's most important, and that's our customer, that's our user, and what they need to know. And again, going back to that whole idea of getting to know your audience and really just kind of designing with them. I'm all about focus groups, right? I've pulled in like people from, my different audiences and said, hey, you guys, I just want to take 15 minutes of your time to understand what's important to you and how you want to learn this stuff. And taking that information and really building that customized content that gives them those options they need without overwhelming them, right? Without overwhelming them, because one thing that I'm sure a lot of learning and development professionals can relate to is people coming up to them and asking them questions that are very basic, and you're like, I covered that in my training. Where you're not listening, right? We're thinking these things, we're not saying it, but the fact of the matter is that user was probably overwhelmed or not paying attention, right? So how can you hit them so that it actually matters to them in that moment, so that they remember it, right? So it's just understanding how your learner wants to learn and why they want to learn it, what's important to them, and basing your training and your training options on just that, and getting rid of all the other noise. There's so much noise out there.
Yeah, it's solid. I would summarize it, everything you'd said, is knowing your audience, giving them the right kind of options they need without overwhelming them with too much choice.
Correct. Or yourself, right? Don't overwhelm yourself, because sometimes you might say, hey, this is going to be great for this person, and this is going to be great for this person, and this audience is going to love this. And next thing you know, you're giving them 10 options, right? 10 options is too much. That's going to overwhelm them. That's going to make the whole process convoluted. Bring it down to like 3 to 5 that hit majority of your audience. And I tell my team all the time, you're not going to make everybody happy, but if you make majority of your class happy, you did your job well. Right? We can always dissect and analyze that small 30% that said, it was all right. Okay, fine. If you want to spend your time there, go for it. We can always improve our processes. But right now, just understand you did a good job. So keep doing what you're doing.
Excellent. Thank you. What resources would you share with our audience, with myself, to learn more about anything in this world?
Sure. Anything. I'll focus on digital adoption because that was kind of like the theme today.
Sure.
So I don't know if you guys have heard about digitaladoption.com, but they have an essential guide to all things digital adoption, including digital transformation as well as change management, best practices, and strategies. So I went on their website, I looked at their guide. It's good stuff. I highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in learning more about transformation and adoption for their company. There's also a lot of, so two of my favorite resources just in life, Harvard Business Review and Forbes. So Forbes has an article, it's a little outdated. It was published, I think, in December 2019. So it's a little over a year old now, but it was called, What is Digital Adoption and Why You Really Need to Know About It? I thought that was very interesting for the basic user. If you know a lot about digital adoption, I don't recommend that for you. This is just for someone who wants to dabble in the idea of digital adoption and understand it a little bit more and how it can help their business processes.
Excellent. Thank you. I will link to those in the show notes. So for all of our listeners, look for those links there so you can learn more about those resources that Stacy recommended. Next question I have for you, Stacy, is who should reach out to you and how can they get in touch?
Anybody who has questions about what I talked about, and I covered a lot, but trust me, I can go a lot deeper. So if anybody has any questions related to what I was talking about regarding user engagement or creating a learner-centered classroom, or really digital adoption and how learning and development teams can really leverage digital adoption to maximize the potential of their existing system and to get full capacity or full use of the system, I can absolutely talk about that all day. So anybody who has questions, Sean, and they can reach me on my LinkedIn page. It's Stacy, S-T-A-C-Y-N as in Nicole Williams. And you can also send me an email. It's stacynicolewilliams@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Excellent. Well, thank you for providing that for us. And thank you for being here today, Stacy, and sharing your awesome knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sean.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Digital Adoption Podcast powered by NextStep. If you or anyone you know specializes in learning and development for software or digital adoption, please have them reach out to us to learn more about being a guest on our show. To learn more, email me at sean@nextstep.io. That's SEAN@nxtstep.io. Thanks, and keep adopting. We'd like to take this time to thank the sponsor of our show, NextStep Consulting. Want to know what the right next steps are for your B2B SaaS business? Are you trying to scale and reach the next level, but you're stuck? We can help. To learn more about how NextStep can help your business reach its goals, email me at sean@nextstep.io. That's SEAN@nxtstep.io, or visit us on the web at nextstep.io.